if we could just begin, because it does seem that Lebanon is really the crux of the conversation, at least today. Israel's suggestion that they are open to direct talks with Lebanon over disarming Hezbollah. At the very same time, I spoke with the Israeli ambassador to the UN just yesterday, Danny Danon, who told me that the government has tried to do this with Israel before, and Hezbollah simply right now is effectively not able to be controlled. And I wonder if you see a realistic path forward here, or if it's your expectation that Israel is just going to try to continue its military operations in this front to the north.
Well, yeah, I mean, things have been shifting quite a bit. I mean, right before this announcement of direct talks or potential negotiations with the Lebanese government, there were evacuation orders for southern Beirut. So things are, happening at a rapid clip. But what remains to be seen is how are we going to deal with these fundamental issues that we haven't just been talking about for the past few months, but the past few years and really decades. So we're talking about Hezbollah, we're talking about the enrichment of uranium in Iran. Yeah. I mean, these are common discussion points. So I don't see how we're going to work out this in in fundamentals in these negotiations. I mean, it is impossible, I think, for the Lebanese government under fire to actually be able to disarm an extremely powerful militia that has been embedded in Lebanon in the political and military fabric of the country for decades, and certainly not in this way. I mean, imagine the number of new Hezbollah or potentially another armed group recruits that you're creating by what has been done in Lebanon. Over a fifth of the population has been displaced at this point. We saw, as you noted, over 100 airstrikes in the course of 10 minutes in central Beirut. So I don't see how we're going to get there with further escalation. Trump has already seen that hasn't gotten him very far with Iran, and it's unclear how we're going to get there with Lebanon. But I do think it would require a lot more pressure from the U.S. administration to rein Israel in, because what we've been seeing is quite devastating.
Well, and to that notion, Israel and the U.S. maintain that their incentives are still aligned, that they are fully in alignment. Do you buy into that, or are we starting to see where there actually could be misalignment if we're talking about a U.S. president who wants to be able to wrap things up in Iran, and Iran that insists that cannot be done if this is still ongoing in Lebanon, and Israel maintaining that it is in their interest, their security interests, for this to continue because of the threat from Hezbollah?
It's hard to see what the upside is for the United States more generally from all of this. I can see the upside from Benjamin Netanyahu's point of view. He was able to degrade the capabilities of enemies like Iran and Hezbollah, but that's looking at it from the prism of a forever war in the Middle East.
Which the president does not want.
Well, the president has said in campaign speeches for many, many years now that he doesn't want it. He's built a movement, the Make America Great Again movement, that has been irate about this war, at least, certain leaders like Tucker Carlson. And so, this would be devastating for Republican poll numbers, I would think, in the upcoming elections. So this doesn't seem to be in the interests of the United States, but it does seem to be in the interests of Israel. And so I think a lot of people are asking those kinds of questions. I think that Netanyahu was able to make the case, perhaps oversell the case for these wars with President Trump, as recent reporting has suggested. But I think he got a lot more than he bargained for, essentially. And so now he's trying to walk a lot of that back. So, we hope that he doesn't move forward with these promises of, destroying a civilization or, ongoing airstrikes by Israel on Lebanon.
Well, of course, a lot of that could depend on the outcome of talks in Islamabad. To your point about the notion that there is, especially on the right, a very firm no forever wars contingent. The Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, has historically been part of that, and he is now going to be leading the delegation. And I want to talk to you, Natasha, about kind of the odds he's going to be facing in these talks, and Iran as a negotiating partner. This is something I actually got into yesterday with the former CENTCOM commander, General Frank McKenzie, who talked about Iranians as negotiators. This is what he said.
The hard part is ahead of us. Look, the Iranians are not great fighters. They've never been great fighters. They're brilliant negotiators, and they know how to negotiate. They grew up in a culture that is based on negotiation. They will now seek to draw negotiations out, change the terms, and create a new reality. And that's our task now will be to take the substantive operational victory which we have obtained and turn it into something lasting and strategic.
How hard is this going to be?
This is going to be enormously difficult. I mean, I think the choice of JD Vance as the as the negotiator says a lot right there, because as you mentioned, he was probably opposed to this war to begin with. So maybe this is the softer side of the U.S. administration going into these negotiations. But, as Mackenzie just mentioned, the Iranians are very skilled negotiators. They know all of the ins and outs of the United States, of motivations. They know all the details that need to be hammered out. It's not clear to me that JD Vance, for all of his knowledge, has as much background going into these negotiations as that. And again, we're still talking about the same fundamental points. Right. We're still talking about uranium enrichment. And so we might end up just getting right back to the JCPOA, the original agreement in 2015 that it took 2.5 years to hammer out with the Iranian regime. And that's hard to believe given the number of lives lost.
Yeah, well, and President Trump maintains that the JCPOA was a bad deal, so bad that he took us out of it.
Right.
Is it possible in your mind for him to be able to get a better deal than that now with the leverage that Iran has proven that it has over the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, listen, I'm sympathetic to the problems with the JCPOA. I worked on Syria for 15 years. I saw the devastation that Iranian proxies can bring. But it's hard for me to think that we could get to a better place at this point, given everything that's happened. I mean, the JCPOA was wrangled in peacetime. At this point, I mean, you can say whatever you want about the Iranian regime, but just a pragmatic actor would have a lot of mistrust for the U.S. administration, not just for this round of fighting, but what we saw in the summer, where in the midst of negotiations, the U.S. and Israel struck Iran again. So it's unclear why the Iranians would trust the United States with regards to any kind of promises or negotiations moving forward. And I think that's going to be a really fundamental element. And back to your point of Israeli and U.S. alignment, I think the United States needs to figure out what it's okay with. And it needs to really impose upon those points on its ally, Israel, because at this point it doesn't seem like Israel is aligned with the United States with regards to that.
Yeah, of course, Israel needs to trust the U.S. to represent it in these negotiations. To your point, the U.S. may not be trusted by Iran. In our final moment, Natasha, should the U.S. trust Iran, given, as you said, we've been having this circular conversation about enrichment and its ambitions for a long time?
I don't think we should ever necessarily trust any regime, right? That's why you have these agreements. That's why you had oversight, on the Iranian nuclear program with the JCPOA. Yeah. You don't just trust blindingly. You actually enforce an agreement that's in place in order to make sure that you have peace moving forward.